Well, folks, welcome back to the Rife Report. We've got a lot of news that we missed that came out of the state of Maine over the last couple of days. Some big shakeups in the Democrat primary. Now, we all know the 2026 Senate election in Maine was supposed to be Democrats' best shot to flip a seat. Previously, you could have said maybe some place like North Carolina was their top place to flip a seat. Some people even had thrown out places like Iowa, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Even with Joni Ernst not running for re-election, that's totally ridiculous. But in Maine was their best shot. And you know why? It is because it was the only state that has a Republican senator up for re-election in 2026 that voted for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election. She's the only one right now. And Susan Collins, who is now 72, I believe, is seeking a sixth term in the Senate. Initially elected back during Bill Clinton's era, when he won re-election to the presidency in 1996, Susan Collins won this seat. She had her predecessor, William Cohen, who had won this seat for many years after year. I think he'd won it back in 1979 initially, won in 1996, and has won every year since then. Now, this is a state that Kamala Harris won by 9 points in 2024. Or 7 points that she won by in 2024. And yet, Maine Democrats are already in disaster mode. They're in disaster mode already. You'd think that this is the top target for the Democrats in 2026, and they would have their shit together. And they clearly do not have it together. They don't. Like this is ridiculous. Everything that has came out from Graham Plantner recently. I mean, this is just some of the most ridiculous things, and it's all self-inflicted. This is a self-inflicted collapse, and I shouldn't say it's not a complete collapse. Like, there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds right now. They're not wounded forever, and I'm not ruling out the fact that they could flip this seat even. But they have so many self-inflicted wounds already before a single ballot has even been cast. And like we said, started with this Graham Plantner, who is 41. He's a Marine vet. I believe he was an oyster farmer before. Really tried to paint himself as similar to what we saw in 2024 on the Senate side in Nebraska with Deb Fischer against Dan Osborne. Really tried to position himself as this, independent. Obviously he's running the Democrat primary right now, but he's an independent of the two parties. But clearly that has not stuck. I mean, it hasn't stuck at all. This guy is a far left-wing radical socialist. This guy was, based on some Reddit posts that we found, potentially a Nazi lover, which is just insane. That this guy, that this was not vetted. How is this not vetted before you get into the race? Like seriously, you literally have a Nazi tattoo on your chest, and you somehow think that it's okay for you to run. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like that is a massive failure, but obviously he's not a seasoned political operative. He's not. And I'm guessing his campaign at the time wasn't being run by people who have a ton of experience running campaigns. That's just a reality. It's like this guy has really shed this, working class, middle of the road, independent. Now it's, Nazi tattoos, far left socialist, and talking about how he's taking psychedelics and he's a socialist these days. And he's going to quote, stop believing in any of the patriotic nonsense. Wow. I still got the guns though. I don't trust the fascists to act politely. Like, what? Who is this guy? And this is a guy that's been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna. Like honestly, this is ridiculous. David Hogg, some big names in Democrat politics right now. Big names in Democrat politics. I mean, this is full out a socialist candidate that we are looking at right here. There is no doubt about that. That we're looking at a full out socialist candidate going into the 2026 Senate election. But it's just ridiculous. But he really has been trying to turn things around. Apparently, he hired a new campaign manager, issued NDAs to all of his staff. Two of his primary opponents quit, and they did endorse Janet Mills, which isn't great for him. But even considering that, there was a brand new poll that just came out. Now, granted, this was taken kind of in the midst of all of this coming out. But from the University of New Hampshire, showed that Graham Plantner, now this was from the University of New Hampshire, showed that he had a 58%, 58% of the respondents said they were going to vote for him in the primary. Now, granted, the most recent one that was administered from the 21st to the 25th does show that Janet Mills is ahead in this race, but by 5 points. You did collapse a big one, and you'd think you look from a Republican internal poll, shows that Graham Plantner is still up. Maybe not as up as much as he was before, but he's still up on Janet Mills by 20 points. Like, we're looking at double digits right now. So, obviously, big liabilities with him. We'll see exactly where this all settles out at. Republicans are saying he's still up by 20 points. Janet Mills is kind of the more seasoned political operative going into the 2026 Senate election for the Democrats. But obviously, there's a big chunk, at least a third, at the worst, a third of Democrats who believe that he should be leading the ticket. He should be the one that they are going to run against Susan Collins in 2026. And all I'm going to say is if I was Susan Collins right now, I would be feeling pretty damn good. Even though she technically has not officially announced that she's running in 2026. It's very clear that she's running. Unless there are some health problems or some issue that comes up, she will be running in 2026. Now, that leads me to the next opponent in the Democrat Party right now, and that is incumbent governor of the state of Maine, Janet Mills. As you remember, she got into kind of a pissing match with President Trump earlier this year over allowing transgenders in female sports, allowing transgenders in female locker rooms and in bathrooms. We know there was kind of a spat on live TV that this happened. Now, she has announced recently that she will be running in 2026 for the Democrat nomination to face off against Susan Collins in 2026. Now, she entered just 2 weeks ago on October 14th, and she's 77 years old. And she's already pledged that if she won, she would only be a one-term senator. I think that is the only way that she can kind of fight back against this idea that she's too old. Because the reality is if Janet Mills becomes, if she becomes the Democrat Senate nominee in 2026, you can see right here, she's 77 years old. Go back to the to Susan Collins. Susan Collins, she's not even 77 years old yet. She's only 72 years old. So that really takes that whole debate about age off the table. And I think the only way that she can really fight back against that is by saying, hey, look, I'm only going to run for one term, which it makes sense, but I think it's kind of, I don't think anyone believes politicians these days. If we're being fully transparent, I don't I'll believe it when I see it. I've heard that same thing from Tom Tillis. I heard that from a lot of people before. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna, hold my breath on that one, plug my nose on that. I'm just not going to. And you can see out of this most recent poll from the University of New Hampshire, you can see right now that her favorability among Democrats or just in general is really collapsing. She before was sitting in the mid 50s for an approval rating. Even at times in late 22, early 23, she was up towards 60% approval. Now she's collapsed to just 43% approval in the state of Maine right now. And at this point, I really don't expect it to recover. I don't expect it to recover for Janet Mills. We know that Janet Mills, in her economic record at least, look, they have some of the highest property taxes in Maine and in the whole New England area in America. They have the highest housing prices, the highest electricity bills. They have record small business closures since 2020, record overdoses from opioids, and the lowest education scores in 2024. Janet Mills is a failure. She's a failure of a governor in this state. She really is. And, I think both of these are better. I think Janet Mills, if anyone, and all that said, Janet Mills has the best possibility to flip this seat, in my opinion. I think she will have the best she'll be the best candidate to flip this seat. Remember, Maine does not elect a lot of lunatic, kind of far left, AOC, Bernie Sanders type candidates. They typically elect more, even if they're mostly liberal, more, center left. We're not getting from the far left here. We're more center left is where they're pulling these politicians from. And that's just a reality of the situation. And so I think that's why she's probably better positioned, not only in a primary, but a general. But look, or I should say just a general. I think the primary right now, look at the odds right now from Polymarket. They kind of keep going back and forth. Is it going to be Graham Plantner or is it going to be Janet Mills? Right now, Janet Mills has a 55% chance of being the Democrat nominee in 2026. But, Democrats, they only have right now what? It's a 58. It's like it's almost a 50-50 split right now we're looking at. A 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans. And look, there's not a lot of money on this either. But that's where we're at. 60% chance that Democrats win, which still gives Republicans a huge opportunity. And plus, remember, the Republicans have the seat right now. Susan Collins is an incumbent. She's been around since 1996. Like that's the reality. So this is where the Democrat Party is right now. They're being pulled far to the left by, like we said, members of the kind of Democrat Socialist of America wing of the party, where you're looking at people like Bernie Sanders, like like AOC. That's what we're looking at right here. And for a Senate race that's going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars, probably hundreds of millions of dollars, this is a nightmare for Democrats where they are right now. And look, they can still pull out of it. We're not saying that they can't pull out of this at the end of the day. They can. I think whoever wins, especially if they're really going to duke it out in the Democrat primary, whether we're talking, is it Janet Mills or Graham Plantner, I think whoever wins, they're going to be limping into the general election. Look, they're going after each other hard, whether it's on corporate taxes, whether it's on Gaza, whether it's on the filibuster. And Bernie Sanders going as far as just say she should just drop out right now, which probably. I don't want to say that she should just drop out would be the best for the party, but someone dropping out would probably be better because they're not going to be as wounded. But also that means they're probably not going to be as battle tested as you would like them to be going into 2026. But I really think whoever wins, based on how things are set up right now, they're limping into the general election. And, progressives, which is about 20% of the Democrat base in the state of Maine, has been threatening to rank Collins number 2 in ranked choice voting. So if you start to see that split in the Democrat Party, where that you're going to have Susan Collins ranked number 2 in there, where if she doesn't get 50% of the vote, you could easily on that second round of ranked choice voting see her come over the 50% threshold if progressives put her as number 2 and don't rank someone else who's an independent higher on there. So Maine Democrats are not united right now. They're really detonating on each other. And look, Susan Collins has a number of advantages going into this election right now. She really does. Look, right now, she's got about a 50, it kind of bounces around. What's her approval rating? I've heard some in the 40s, I've heard some in the 50s, I've heard some right around 50. She's about a 50-50 approval rating right now. Look, she is the chair of the Appropriations Committee right now, and she brings home tons of federal dollars for Maine. We know that. In the appropriations process, she is able to deliver lots of federal funds to her home state. That's a big advantage for her. And the people in the state know that. There's a reason why she's won in every election since 1996. 96, she wins by 5.5 points. 2002, she wins by 16.7 points. 2008, she wins by a massive margin of 22 points. 22 points. At the same time, a massive blue wave swept across America and elected Barack Obama, and Maine voted for Obama by 17 points. They voted for Obama by 17 points, and they voted for Collins by 22 points. Wow. Talk about that. And look, independents are a big part of the electorate in Maine. Independents trust her on the job, on defense, on really being a pragmatic politician, not a partisan hack. Because that's the reality. And for my Republican friends who maybe don't like Susan Collins as much, here's a reality that we all need to face down right now. The reality is that if Susan Collins is not at the top of that ticket, or you could say Paul LePage, I think there's a case to be made there, but look, he's not running for Senate. Being a federal representative or a federal senator is a lot different than being the governor, a statewide position, in my opinion. So I think we have to kind of dispel that or put that notion out there to begin with. But the reality is that for Susan Collins, if she is not at the top of this ticket, this would be probably a Democrat. They probably have a 90% chance, 95% chance of winning this seat. So you can either have a Republican in Susan Collins, who I know a lot of people are going to call her a rhino, who's going to vote with the party 70% of the time. She's going to vote against the party 30% of the time. Or you can have a Democrat who votes for the party 1% or votes with the GOP and with our priorities 1 or 2% of the times. That's the choice you have to make. We don't live in this fantasy land where we can run a candidate who in a primary is maybe exactly what you're looking for, but has no chance in a general election. We've done this before, folks. We've played this game before. This is not the first time we're playing this game. Look, Arizona, Kari Lake. Did we not learn our lesson from Kari Lake in Arizona? Like honestly. Go back, 22 was terrible for this. 22 was horrid. Look, you had Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, which was just disastrous. You had Herschel Walker in Georgia. You had Blake Masters in Arizona. You go to the gubernatorial side in 2022, and you had Doug Mastriano, who literally took like a hiatus at the very, just terrible candidate. You had Kari Lake, once again, lost in this election. You up here, you had Tudor Dixon, just not a good look. These were not a good look. And what were the types of Republicans, the not, far, there was a lot of MAGA candidates that won, but the MAGA crazies, there's a line where I think they kind of went a little bit too far. Look, you have Brian Kemp, who you want to talk about, who's one of the most conservative governors in America. Policy-wise, he's one of the most conservative governors in America. And you want to say, he didn't go along with Trump in 2020. Yeah, because Donald Trump lost the election in 2020. That's why he didn't go along with it. He did what he was supposed to do. He lost the goddamn election in 2020. That's the reality. Who won by massive margins? Ron DeSantis, who just 4 years earlier barely beat out a crack addict. Or okay, let's be nice. Someone who had smoked crack before, who maybe was addicted to it in the past. Andrew Gillum. He goes by winning the state by not even a half a percentage point to winning by 1.5 million votes in this race. By 20 freaking points. That's the reality of who won. So let's just remember, we have to play the cards that are dealt to us, number one, and we also have to be realistic and pragmatic. We have to be very realistic about this. There's not another Republican that is going to win or have a chance to win like Susan Collins in this election. And you can see here that in 2026, right now, it's considered Inside Elections has it as a tilt Republican, but it's a toss-up from the Cook Political Report, Sabato's crystal ball, and the race to the White House. It is all a toss-up as of right now. All a toss-up. So, for Democrats, just to kind of finish things out right now, the 2026 Senate election in Maine is I don't want to say it's slipping away from them, but there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds right now. And it's not because Susan Collins is invincible, but because Democrats in the state of Maine have made a couple disastrous moves. Look, I think Janet Mills, although she is probably the best candidate to beat Susan Collins, there's a lot of liabilities there. Whether it's her economic policies or tenure over the last, what has she been governor now for? It'd be 8 years or 4 years. She was elected in 22, I think. I don't remember, but she very, very bad economic record in the state. Then you look at the fact that, she's 5 years older than Susan Collins. So that kind of takes the whole age thing off of the table. And she actually becomes the older candidate in this race. And then you look at Graham Plantner, who her and Janet Mills are just going at it, tearing each other apart, who has neo-Nazi tattoos, just some really horrific stuff. Talking about how he just doesn't trust fascists and he's still got guns. And the older I got, he became a communist. Yeah, that's exactly what we want to hear. That's exactly what Americans want. Is they want to elect a guy with a Nazi tattoo who is a self-described communist, who really tried to present himself as the working class, like we said, that kind of Dan Osborne-esque. But we know Dan Osborne, he is a left-wing socialist too. That's the reality. But this is where we are in the race. There's polling showing that Graham Plantner this is internal Democrat polling, is neck and neck with Susan Collins, and Collins is losing to Mills by 5 points in a general election. We're going to get closer, and I'm taking all of that with a grain of salt as of right now. But look, Look at these most recent polls right now. We're really in a dogfight right now between Janet Mills and Graham Plantner, and whoever wins is going to be limping to the finish line. They're going to be a wounded nominee. And Collins can just let them, she doesn't even need to campaign right now. Just let them duke it out. Let them trip over themselves. But when all is said and done right now, the Maine Democrats are not looking good. This is not a good position to be. As of right now, I really think that this seat, it's like, I think Susan Collins will win and it will stay red, but we're just going to see what happens. Look, we're still a year out. We still have a 2025 election to get through. We need to get all the way to 2026 if we really want to see what's going to happen. The closer we get, the more informed decisions we're going to make there. But folks, that is going to wrap things up for today. As always, folks, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button so you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.